It's been an interesting just journey for me for that. I never found myself or thought of myself ever being in a field like this. I went to college to study communications and broadcasting. My initial steps into that were was that I wanted to be in broadcasting somehow, preferably video. I come from a small town, so for me, when people are asking me like, "What do you want to do with your life?" I'm like, "Well, I want to do something fun and cool." And what's more like cool than being on the TV so that people know who you are. Just grew up in a family that watched a lot of, just cable news and stuff like that. And so I knew all the reporters and broadcasters for CBS and our affiliates local here. So, I would be like, oh yeah, I want to be like one of those people where they can see I'm like, oh my gosh, that's that person. I wanted to be that guy. Got into college though and realized I did not want to be that guy. It was not what I thought it was, and it just did not work with my personality as much. And so I'm like, you know what? No, I'd rather not. So I generalized myself, got into communications out of school, kind of was just looking around to see what I could utilize my degree for. That was one of my main goals, was that I was actually going to use my degree to somehow get a job that would then, the whole structure of me going to college and paying all that money, I wanted to make sure I actually had an argument for it to my parents and to everyone around me. So stumbled upon, honestly, from Dakota County. Local government was never on my radar. But when I started searching for, what kind of job did I want at the time, I was anticipating the birth of my first child. So I knew I wanted something flexible. I knew I wanted something that, made a certain amount, that was at a certain location, all those things kind of put into the basket of what did I want from a job. And this one kind of just came up, threw my application in. I'm like, I've had experience with volunteering. I'm an Eagle Scout, so I've been in Boy Scouts. I would do a lot with our youth group for our local church for a lot of our community stuff. I did a lot of extracurriculars through school. So I had a lot of experience volunteering as a volunteer. But when it came to volunteer leadership, I was, for me, I didn't really have a lot of that experience. I had a lot of good communications experience. I was acting at the time when I was looking for a job as a business consultant, kind of stepping in and working with a team to kind of help just small businesses become financially successful again, to kind of pinpoint what are the things that are going on, what do you need help with. And I get a lot of that. My dad is a small business owner, so I just kind of learned from experience from him. And that's kind of how I got into that first job right out of college. And just knew that it wasn't really going to always be for me in that. And so looking for that job, ended up applying, interviewing, and I got the job. And on day one, I kind of went up to, our commissioners, county commissioners. They would be considered like, if you have a board or any kind of like leadership in that way, they're the same. They fit that same box. And our commissioners and our senior leaders in the county, we all met, and I kind of asked them, all right, so you hired me now. We want to create this volunteer program for the county. What do we want that to look like? And basically, the whole answer they gave me was, we don't really have an idea of what we want this to be. You're building this from the ground up. We're basically taking all the old things that we've done, we're throwing them out, and we're going to start all over. So it's basically here is a blank slate. You need to build it. So that first couple of months was me getting as many books as I possibly could to read up on volunteer leadership and management and all of that. I searched throughout the Twin Cities region, the metro region and beyond, just to kind of get connected with people who were already in it, to, talk to them, to see if they'd have some time to just do one-on-ones to get their, experience behind that. Where are we at? What are we doing? What we should do in that. And so 10 years now, I'd say that we're probably one of the premier, county programs in the state of Minnesota when it comes to volunteering in that. And I think, that's not lightly said or lightly done. There's been a lot of work that comes with that. Our senior leadership and our commissioners have been excellent at always just having our backs and always saying that, yes, we see the value in this and we want you to continue moving forward with that. And our county staff and our volunteers have just worked immensely hard just to make this program what it is now. And, we have great stats in the sense that we usually put in anywhere between 35, 40,000 hours a year. We have about, anywhere between 5,500 to on a high mark, we'll have closer to 7,000 volunteers work with us during any given year. In that, we work with 10 different departments in our county. That gives us a little bit more of a uniqueness because we can kind of target a lot of different areas of interest and investment. So public health, community corrections, the parks, library system. We have just general volunteering for like if you're corporate or a family looking to get invested, so like adopt a highway or adopting a park, things like that. We are also into that. We work with our sheriff's office to provide internships and volunteering through them. And we just do so much with that there's so much of a wide net that we can cast. So it's actually really it's fun for me because every day is different, and there's always something new coming down the pipeline. So for me, I got to stay on my toes. There's always something coming around. But it's just really cool to see just the community come together and just the stuff that we're able to do. I mean, just kind of looking back just from 10 years from now, I mean, one of the easier ones to say is that some of our parks that we've worked on, it's like night and day, where 10 years ago they looked a certain way. And now because of the volunteer investment we have in them, they look completely different. And like, we have pollinating flowers and just native shrubs and grasses in some of our prairie areas. We actually, a couple of years ago, welcomed a bison herd into one of our county parks. And we're like one of the only counties in the country that own a bison herd. And the reason why we do that is because we're like, hey, you know what? These animals naturally do the work that we kind of are doing with our volunteers and staff. We just get some of these bison out here and just they be bison, they're going to do a lot of that work for us. And so we never would have gotten there though if we didn't have volunteer investment in the first place, because the volunteers are the ones that clear cut the areas from invasives. They got the prairie ready so that we could then welcome something as cool as a bison herd into our county. And I have so many of those stories that, just I always, when I'm talking to our staff, it's always we always have that conflict of like, well, we don't want volunteers taking away jobs, and we don't want volunteers, usurping staff members, things like that. And I always tell our staff that our volunteers are not here to take anything away. They're here to add something. And so our staff are always being asked, what are the things that we would love to do, but we just don't either have the time, the resources, or the capacity. Those are the things that we can maybe look at and say, hey, can a volunteer do this? And if so, how can we create a program that would naturally fit within what we do and then offer that to the volunteer? And I've had some weird stuff, and it's always one of those things where I'm like, I don't know if anyone's going to say yes to this. It's kind of boring on my end. Like, I feel like it's boring. And then you have people come out, and be like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. I love doing this. So it's really been cool to see just our community step up and take ownership. And what's great is because we are, local government, because we're a government agency and an entity, we kind of have, sometimes from some people, we just have sometimes a bad outlook on who we are. And it's been really cool for us to really build transparency with our constituents and build transparency in our communities, because they get to come alongside of us and do the work and see what we do. They get to meet the staff. They get to see that we're not villains twisting our mustaches and wondering how we can make their lives awful. We're normal humans just doing our job and doing, what we think is best for the community. And they get input now to give that to us. They've always had it, but now this allows them to have I would say an extra step of input and impact than just maybe going to the ballot box and voting on something or just checking a box on something. It allows them to really have investment in their own community of what actually happens. And so it builds great trust. It builds great transparency to the point where we have other counties looking at what we do to say, man, what are you doing differently than us? And I always point to them saying, it's this is what it is. And, it takes a lot of work and it takes a lot of time. But the fruit of that labor is just tenfold when you come to look at that.
That's awesome. It's exciting. I will say I'm intrigued by the bison herd that you have, but we can talk about that offline. But there have been a couple of questions that have come in. You referenced that you read a lot of books and you did a lot of study to sort of catch yourself up and learn about volunteer engagement. And we have a question about, do you have any book recommendations? And then we have another question related to how do you shifted the thinking of expectation to activation for your volunteers? From the I'm owed this to this is I want this, how can I help? And then the other question I have, so you're getting 3 questions. The third question I have is if you can also explore, since you built this from the ground up, you work with lots of different departments, how did you get buy-in? What was the process? What was the initial reaction when you presented this to each of your different departments about how can volunteers come in and work alongside? So those would be the 3 things I'm going to ask.
Sure. Yeah. So a couple of books, I'll kind of just, and I will give you this. If you go to Google and just do, type in volunteer management books, you're going to get just a huge list of books that you can take a look at. I always tell people find the books that you think are going to be most investment to you, just because of how they're written or their style. Find that and go with that. That's, you'll know right off the bat when you start reading it if this is something you're going to absorb or if it's just something you're going to read and not really take. One book that just comes to mind when I, do talk about books, though, is the one I really enjoyed was it's called The New Breed, and it's I believe written by Jonathan McKee. And that was a really good book. I liked it because it's a book that's written to kind of how do you equip and how do you woo the 21st century volunteer. Things are a little bit different now, just in terms of how we view things. And so it's just a great way to just kind of capture some of the most up and coming, what's the most modern way of kind of utilizing volunteers. And that was a really good one to kind of just, take some of those stats, take some of those facts, and then put it right up front and give some great ideas and maybe what you could do to get some investment into that. So I'd say for sure that's a really good one that I like in that. And then the other one that I thought was pretty good was, it's just called Volunteering. It's a Guide to Serving. And that was Leith Anderson and Jill Fox. That one, it's more written for churches, but I found a lot of good insight into that one. A lot of the partners that I first worked with when I came into this was working with our local churches because they utilize volunteers across the board. And so that was a book that they had just recommended to me. And I thought that that was a good one just to kind of get some foundational understanding of how to build a better program with that. And then the other one that I thought was interesting, and I'm trying to think because it's been a while ago of what it is. But I believe it's called just Volunteer Management. And it's by Steve McCurley. And that was another one that I read that I thought was just another great way to understand just the volunteer sphere. I will say, though, I kind of have moved away a little bit from books, and I've done a lot more, or what I've personally, get impact from is meeting with people in person and just kind of talking face to face, finding organizations that are very similar to how we're constructed. So, I'm looking at maybe city government, local government, even kind of some state government, and meeting with those people and having conversations with them and asking them, what are you experiencing in today's working world? What are some of the things that you're going through? The difficulties, the successes. So I always tell people, I'm like, hey, when it comes to volunteering, how this works is that either we, succeed together or we fail together. That if a volunteer comes in and they have a bad experience volunteering, doesn't matter with who, they're going to be turned off from volunteering as a whole. So it's better for us to kind of work together instead of trying to compete against one another for people. We just need to realize that if we work together, we're going to have a lot more success because those volunteers are not always going to stay at the same organization. They might actually want to go out and try different areas. So I might win and somebody else might win. And down the line, we're sharing volunteers now. And it's a great way to look at that. So I'd say definitely, look at your contacts. If you haven't done that for a while, dust that off, network, meet people. All of that is a good way of kind of, utilizing that in some way, shape, and form. For the other question, Rob, what was that second question? Then I'll answer here.
Oh yeah. So it was sorry, it was by Chris, who asked, how did you shift the thinking and expectation from expectation to activation for the residents of your county? So moving away from the I pay taxes, therefore I'm owed, to I want this, I can help.
Sure. Yeah. So I think what was nice about us starting blank slate is that we got to kind of sunset or retire what people had in the past. And usually for our county, so just give you an idea of who we are as a county. So we're the third largest county in terms of population in Minnesota. We are on track to become the second largest county here pretty soon. In that, where we're located is we're just south of our two biggest cities in the state, Minneapolis and St. Paul. And we're just kind of north by about an hour and a half from one of our other larger cities of Rochester, so Mayo Clinic fame. So we are kind of surrounded by large populations. The county in itself, we're almost cut evenly, a third suburban, a third urban, and a third rural. So we have a huge demographic that we reach out to that's very different from one another. In that, what's great though is once again that wide net that we get to cast when it comes to our opportunities. Same thing comes when we recruit. We have a wide, outlet of people that we can draw from, because we don't care if you live in the county or not. If you want to come and volunteer for us, I don't care where you're coming from. If you want to drive 4 hours and come to one of our events, do it. Absolutely, we'll take you. And so we kind of have this mindset that we draw from, the state as much as we can in that. So because we were able to kind of sunset and say, hey, you know what? There used to be a parks volunteer program. It was unofficial and there wasn't a lot there. There was a library way of doing things. We're just going to sunset all of those things and we're starting new. And, we did have pushback in the very beginning. People like when, people don't like change, they like consistency. But we kind of just, we kind of came with it saying things are changing and we are going to make sure that, it's done well and that you're going to actually benefit from that. And that's what we really led with, is that we are going to do this so well that yes, there is going to be some growing pains in the very beginning, but you're going to look back and be like, I'm so glad we did that because now I'm benefiting so much more in that. And it was having conversations with people who, were not quite sure. It was, and what worked best for us, and I would always suggest this, is find the people who are always on board from the get-go. Who are the people that are really excited, who want to champion this, who are ready to get engaged and ready to get active right out of the gate. Work with them, find a couple easy wins that you can, then market and show off, because those wins then are going to then help change the conversation when someone's like, well, this is not going to work. This seems too expensive or too advanced or too complicated. You can point to those successes and be like, no, we're already doing things. Look at what we're doing to succeed in this. We can do the same for you. And that really kind of, when people started looking at the data and the facts and all the things, and I would also say that collect as much data as you can and always be collecting data as much as you can, because numbers don't lie. I know they don't tell the full picture at times, but numbers don't lie either. And so when you can show, break it down for them, it's a great way for people to really see that, oh yeah, this actually does make sense. I need to champion this as well. I need to get on board as well, or I'm going to get left behind. People don't want to get left behind. They want to be on board with that. And I will tell you, it's been 10 years and there are still people that are coming to me being like, I never realized you existed in the county. Like, that's really cool to do. Like, we should do something. It's like, it's been 10 years. How do you not know about me in that? But I will answer another question I saw pop up real quick. If you're wondering how many staff are under me, I have no one. I am a person of one. I work in communications in the county. So there are 9 staff that work in communications. They help me maybe 5% of the year in that. How it works is that our communication staff, we're siloed and we're considered specialists in our field. So we have like a web content guy, we have a social media person, we have a person that does all print media and all of that. So we all kind of have our silos that we work on. And so mine is community relations and volunteer services. And so, I focus on that. Now, I don't have anyone under me, but I have a good amount of staff, probably about 20 to 25 that are what we'd call our volunteer contacts in our departments. So, that might be someone who's running a certain program in environmental resources, and they're in charge of a couple programming. They don't report to me, but I partner with them to kind of build out the program, to work with them on, I kind of oversee the big picture as a volunteer program, so the boring things like liability waivers and procedures and policies and all of that. And then our volunteer leaders or our volunteer contacts are the boots on the ground leaders who are interacting with our volunteers. Now, with that being said, I also try to make it an investment in myself that I'm going to those events so that people can rub shoulders with me and that our volunteer contacts know that they're not by themselves, that I'm also invested in this. And I'm gonna, if we need to go out into a swamp and collect water samples, I'm trudging along with all of them to go collect water samples. It's great because I can now learn how to recruit for that and tell a story about that because I've experienced it firsthand. But it's also great because, like I said, in the beginning, people didn't know who I was or what I looked like. So I could get like, hey, how's this program going? Do you like it? Is it easy to sign up? Like, I would get, just answers all over the place, and people would tell me, not realizing that I was the person putting it all together. Not so much anymore. People know who I am. But it's still a great way because it's that open door transparency where people know who I am. And they can tell me if we're doing something like, Garrett, this is so annoying that this is all we have for tools. I wish we could have this, this, and this. And it's like, hey, yeah, good to know. Let me go back. Let's see what we can do on that. And I wish, we don't have, and if you're wondering too, it's like, we do not have a large budget. We don't have all the capacity in the world. Like, I'd love to wave the magic wand and have all those problems go away. But it takes time and resources and just investment. And sometimes you can say yes, sometimes you have to say no. But you can do what you can for that. So
Well,
I kind of answered two of those questions, I think, but let me know if I didn't fully get to that.
no, I think that that's great. There's some conversation going on that was prompted from a question related to uh, I you had mentioned about talking about numbers and how they don't lie, and there was a question about how do you get um, your volunteers to log their hours. There was a related question: how do you get your departments to log those hours? Um, and making sure that you're telling the whole story, and what other measurements do you that you use that others might want to consider.
Sure. I wish I had a magic answer to that one. 10 years in, and we're still, we send out emails to our volunteers, please log your hours. And then we send out more emails, please log your hours. And we keep to this day having to send emails out to remind people. I think a lot of it is just making sure that it's always that balance of you don't want to send out too many emails, but you also need to send out something to kind of stay in the loop. And so it's finding that middle ground, and that can be kind of challenging, but it's balancing those two where you're not annoying them, but you're annoying them to get it done in that way. When it comes to our staff, so for us, a lot how we communicate our stats, and like I said, we love at the county, we love to collect stats and we love to collect numbers. I mean, our county is very intentional about what we do and why we do that, and a lot of it is based off of the numbers that we're looking at. And so same way applies for volunteer programming. So every year, what we do is we put out, used to at the end of the year, now I do it in April just to coincide with Volunteer Month and Volunteer Appreciation Week. But we actually put together, I think it's like a 4 or 5 page just info chart or info document that we make public. We send it out, we email it as a PDF just through email to all of our volunteers in our network. And then we also post it on our website that it's available for download throughout the year. And it's a really nice, just awesome info chart. If you're not sure what that is, it's basically utilizing pictures to communicate numbers. People like that visual aspect more than just looking at a sheet that just has a ton of numbers on it. And so we really kind of highlight, the volunteer hours, how much money we save because of volunteer work, how many volunteers do we have? Those are some big numbers that we highlight. But then we also tell the story of here's what some of the stuff that we did this year comes from those numbers. So one of the programs we have is called Fix It Clinic. We utilize our volunteers who love to tinker and fix things, who have that knowledge. We have events through our libraries where people can take broken stuff. So think like a torn pair of jeans or a lamp that doesn't work or a family heirloom that like an old radio that they'd love to maybe have work again. And we have our volunteers work on these things and see what we can do to fix those. And our mindset is that we don't want people throwing away stuff that can just easily be fixed, because that stuff just ends up in a landfill. And so it's been awesome to see that, every year we're saving thousands of pounds of stuff entering our landfills because of the volunteer investment that we do. And so we showcase those numbers. Here's how many items we fixed. Here's how many pounds of garbage we saved from going into a landfill, but actually get reused again. So we're always trying to find ways that we can kind of gather that data. And for staff, what I found out is that, I send it out to all of our volunteer leads, and I tell them what we're doing and what we're collecting. And I get a good response from that, but there might be some who don't respond. Well, when they see that infographic, and I literally had this happen just last week, we're having a conversation with somebody and they're like, that's a really nice infographic. Like, it's a shame that our stuff's not on there though. I'd love for us to be represented. All I had to do was say, you don't respond to me. I don't have that data. So if I don't have that data, I can't respond about it because I'm the one that's going to communicate it. So it kind of light bulb goes on of like, oh, I probably need to respond then. If you don't have the data, I guess that makes sense why it's not in the report. So sometimes it's just, if you don't have all the stuff together, create it, send it out. You're going to get people on board because once again, they're going to see the successes of that and want to be on board with the success as well. And so, sometimes you might just have to, pick what you have and work with the people that are willing to work with you, and then increase that circle as you go on with that.
So, great. Thank you. Thank you for the clarification. Getting buy-in organizationally and especially tracking hours, those two topics, I think are just perennial issues that volunteer managers have. It will probably always be perennial issues. And yeah, the more we can educate, the more we can get into people's faces and remind them of this importance, the better it is for all. And I don't think that there is a silver bullet for any of that.
I wish I do. And Rob, one thing to kind of help, if you're not like artistically driven or have like an artistic talent, there's a lot of great resources online. A couple that, I know a lot of organizations use. So Canva is one of them. If you're looking to create really nice posters, brochures, handouts, infographics, Canva is a great one to use, or PictoChart is another one. And I honestly think I use PictoChart, and I think it's like less than $100 a year to subscribe to it and utilize their services. So, I will say, I will pull back the curtain a little bit. We do have a in-house graphic designer that does a lot of when it comes to marketing and stuff, he does a lot of our logo designing and all of that. So I get a plus when I can kind of tap into his talent and resources. But even if you don't have someone that has, you don't have a graphic designer in-house, or you don't have someone that or yourself, or you don't really can draw that logo or whatever, there's a lot of good resources that you can tap into that where they basically will have the layout ready for you and you can just plug and play. And
Yep.
so utilize that, make your stuff visually appealing and visually stunning. That's what's going to attract people to actually grab your stuff. And for me, that might be more conversation with government agencies, because I know you've gotten those things in the mail from, either your city or state or county. And it's some of the most ugly stuff where it's just like maybe just text, full text, or it's like a logo that's been photoshopped into something. It's like, this is the ugliest thing. I'm not reading this. Like, make it appealing, make it visually desirable for someone to actually want to go through that, because that's going to be how you get people to get involved and interact with your stuff. Make it look
Yeah.
good.
Yeah. Those are great recommendations. I'm going to pivot again. There's a couple other questions that have come up that will change sort of the direction of our conversation. There is someone that's interested in volunteerism. In volunteerism, you are a county entity. And obviously there's an emphasis of getting your residents in your county involved in volunteering. But does your county offer volunteer opportunities for people that are from outside your county to come in to volunteer in Dakota County?
Yes, we do. I said prior, just briefly, that we don't require a residency to volunteer with us. If you're not a part of our county, that's fine. Like, we have people from all over our state, even like when our internships regionally and nationally come to us. In that as well. But for our volunteers, just for the sake of, getting to the events and stuff like that, or being involved, but we draw from a large region. So many different cities, many different counties. We're really close to Wisconsin. So we have people from Wisconsin all the time come over, and a lot of how we draw them is that the word of mouth has just gotten out now that our program is a high quality program that offers really fun and innovative events. And so it's something that people want to be involved with. It's one of those, when we release something, people are excited to sign up for it because they're like, oh my gosh, this event is so much fun. I love this. And they're, chomping at the bit before we even release registration for that. And that's taken time. And that's taken, 10 years of word of mouth and making sure that we're doing things right. And if you're wondering, what are those right things? I always tell our staff there are two things that we always make sure we want to do. Number one is we want our volunteer to always feel welcomed, no matter where they're coming from, no matter who they are. We want them to feel welcomed and included in that. And so and that's just simply, welcoming people and including them. Like, when they show up, say hello, let them know that they're seen, that they're there. So that's a great one that we always strive to do with that. The other one that we do is that we want to be efficient. We want our volunteers to know that whatever you do, whatever we're asking you to do, we're never wasting your time. So I always work with our volunteer leads that when people are showing up for check-in and stuff, make sure we get that done in a quick manner so that people are not standing around for 20 minutes and being like, man, why did I come so early? What's the point of this? And I always tell our staff, make sure that you have your stuff ready to go so that when the volunteers show up, you are ready to get to work, because we want to show our volunteers that we're not going to waste your time. We're not going to have you show up and then maybe not even work with you on that. Like, no, people, when they come to our events, know that we're going to put them to work in a good way to have maximum impact for the time that we give them. So those two things, being welcoming and being efficient with their time, really just increases that high quality experience for people, where people are wanting to come back. And what's great about that is they tell their family and their friends, and word starts to kind of get out naturally that, hey, when you see something from Dakota County on a network or wherever, that's a good one to go to. That's a place that really treats us well. Make sure you get on that list.
Great, thanks.
Yeah, so the tourism piece of that, we don't necessarily always need to draw people in tourism wise. We allow the word of mouth to kind of do that for us, where people come to us because they want to experience what other people have told them.
Yeah, well, your response has just prompted a whole bunch of other questions. So, so going along the volunteer sort of engagement journey, um, I'm going to give you a series of questions. Feel free to answer them how you wish. So, one is a couple that are related. What is your onboarding process for your volunteers? And related to that is, do you offer any um, trainings? Are there any required trainings? Do you do background checks? Um, what does that sort of bringing people in process looks like? And also, sorry, there's more things coming in, so I'm trying to read as so I'm give me a
Let me
second.
take those two then, Rob, and
Yeah,
then
yeah,
I'll
that
answer
would
a
be great.
couple as we go. So yeah, so this is a great time to kind of say, hey, folks, if you don't use Better Impact, now would be maybe a good time to consider that. I would say a lot of the onboarding process, it can be very time consuming. So any way that you can cut back on some of that busy work time, the better it's going to be for you, because you have more time now to invest in building high quality programming. So our onboarding process, how that usually works for us, and because we're a government entity, we have to be a little bit more intensive in that. And what I mean by that is every volunteer that works with us, we want to make sure they sign a liability waiver, whether that's either through registration through Better Impact. We have registration promoted through that system where people can kind of go online, fill out an application, they do their liability waivers, they sign all of that. It works very similar to what you see with Apple, Google. They get a document electronically, they read through it, they check it off, good to go. And now they're in our system. And how we allow our volunteers to work in our system is that they can shop around and volunteer when they want to. So they might sign up as a volunteer, and then we may not actually have them be an active volunteer until maybe 2-3 months down the line, or they might jump in right away. We also might have people have gaps where they volunteer during the winter, and then we don't see them for maybe they go down snowbirds, so we don't see them until the summer. We allow our volunteers to dictate when and how they volunteer on that. But what's nice about Better Impact is that we're able to keep track of all of that. So if somebody needs a certain document, a certain training, I can keep track of everyone, every single volunteer, and everything, all that data. Once again, all that data, all that information, everything. I can keep track of that, and I can share that between our volunteer staff if they need that. So when it comes to trainings and other things like that, we can keep track of our volunteers based on trainings. So we have a volunteer park trail patrol program where we have them do an online CPR training, and we just work with an affiliate who offers that. We can host it in Better Impact. They can then take it. We just log it in Better Impact that they finished it. We give it an expiration date, and now I know when that volunteer's expiration date comes up. I can keep track of all that through Better Impact. Background checks work the same way, where we institute the background check from an outside agency, but I keep track in Better Impact when that person completes it and how they complete that. And if that's going to be different, just based on how your organization's policies work on what background checks should look like, what training should look like, things like that. But Better Impact allows me to always stay updated on, who's who has what. And then that way, what's great is that Better Impact allows us just to have more insight of who we're bringing in, making sure that the people we're bringing in have everything that we need them to have. If you're curious to see, like, would that be a barrier? We don't really see that as a barrier. People understand that, and once again, it's because it comes with who we are. A little bit of, because we're a government agency, people are just kind of aware that sometimes there is a little bit more paperwork that's involved with that. And if people have, concerns or hesitation with that, I just explain it to them of here's why we have to do what we do. So, one for us that you may not have to deal with is called the Tennyson Notice. Basically, what that means is that I can't share personal information between volunteers. So sometimes volunteers will come to me and say, hey, can I get like an email list of everyone who's in this group so that we can kind of have our own email chain in that. And so some organizations will be like, sure, here you go. Here's the list. Have fun with that. Get together and do that. For me, I'm like, because I cannot do that, there are other ways that we have to kind of do business in that. And so everyone's a little bit different on how those work. You need to kind of work in your organization to hash some of that out. But what I love about Better Impact is that it cuts back on so much of that busy paperwork and back and forth emails and phone calls. Like it streamlines the process where honestly, I mean, we were on Better Impact day one when I joined with the county, and we would not be where we're at today if Better Impact was not alongside of us because of all of the extra time I saved. We were able to build the program as we went. And, I always tell our staff too that you utilize 100%, utilize 10%. Better Impact is there to help you maximize your work time. And so if you're not getting positive outcomes from that, you're doing something incorrect. So, everyone utilizes it differently with us, but it's just been a game changer for us in that way of just making sure that we're doing everything that we need so that we're making our volunteers safe, we're making our staff safe, and everyone's kind of, everyone's being put where they need to be put.
Yeah, great, wonderful. Thank you for that explanation and gave me some time to get through the rest of the thread.
Sure.
Where the other questions were leading toward was recognition. So, what do you do to recognize volunteers? Do you provide swag? Sort of related to the swag component and background check component, are there any fees that you charge people in order to volunteer, like covering the cost of their background check and the like? And then lastly, adjacent to this is given that you are an office of one and you are working in conjunction with all these other departments, how does quality control get managed and getting your and how do you resolve quality control issues between you and the departments you work with?
Sure. I'll take that one first. With that quality control, how that works is that so our volunteer contacts or our volunteer leads in those departments, they know that I'm kind of the person at the top who handles all of the bigger picture. We make that very clear. We make that very transparent that that's the way things run. And that what's nice about being a government entity is that people in government already kind of think that way, that you have a system set up that kind of shows here's where we need to go for certain steps, or here's the person that is that contact or that we should be working through with them. There's a hierarchy built into that where people kind of tend to know how that should work. So if you don't have that ingrained into your organization, that might be a little bit harder to implement and instill, but it's still good just to let people know that. And I always kind of make it in a way that people are accepting, where I'm like, I take care of all the boring, awful things. So, you send that to me. You can do the fun stuff. I'll take care of the boring stuff. And it allows people to be like, good, I'll push that off. And they don't really know that what they're doing is they're doing what they should be. So find a way that works for your staff to kind of, get them to do that. But for how that works too is that I will meet with our volunteer leads annually on a regular basis, right? And so it's just keeping up those networks. I keep tabs on our volunteers. They always know that they can get a hold of me if they have a bad experience or if they're having something that they don't like. Like we have that open channel of communication between the staff and between the volunteers. It's not perfect. There are definitely times where, stuff comes up where we're like, wow, we haven't done that yet. Like we should definitely make sure that that's being done. Or I'll have because we have such a transition with staff sometimes, it's always kind of making sure that that information is being passed off to the next person. Sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. So it's just always, once again, having that open line of communication to make sure, I keep myself a list, kind of like what happens throughout the year by month or by week. And then I know to kind of follow up with that person. I give it about a month and a half earlier to say, hey, just so you know, your programs are coming up. What do we need to do to relook at that? How do you feel about that? So I'm always kind of personally just touching base with those people to know we're always on the same page on that. Like I said, it's not perfect. There are definitely times that stuff falls through the cracks. That's us being people. We're fallible, so we make issues, we make mistakes, but we do the best that we can to make sure that we're open to that. And then that second question, remind me, Rob, what was that again?
Oh, related to recognition, how do you recognize volunteers? Is there swag? And adjacent to that, since there can be a cost for recognition efforts and also costs for background checks, do you implement any kind of fee for people to be able to volunteer to offset those costs?
Sure, absolutely. So we do recognition, we do everything above. It just depends on, since we have such a large demographic that we work with, and it's different ages, it's different backgrounds, different races, different religions, you name it. We have all of it in our county. So we just have really kind of utilized our volunteers in the last 10 years to kind of tell us what they want from us. Now, a lot of what it is too is, once again, it's that doing your job and doing it well, providing that high quality experience. That's a lot of what it is right from there. People feel appreciated when you don't waste their time. People feel appreciated when you don't waste their talent. I mean, if you think about it from an end as a volunteer, when I was building this program from scratch, I just asked myself questions that as a volunteer, what would I want? How would I want to be treated? What would I expect this organization to be and to do? And we kind of built it up from there. And one big thing that always came to mind was that I don't want my time wasted. Like my time is precious. Like sometimes people would rather write you a check than spend time because time is super precious and it's hard to come by. And so we don't want to waste people's time. And so one of the biggest ways that we show appreciation is by making maximum impact with people's time when they're with us. But we also do different other things. It's always thanking them when they show up, and helping them see that big picture is another great way. Where when people get together, we really explain, here's why you're doing this. Here's why you're here. We do that twofold. Number one, it's a great way to appreciate them and help them see the larger picture. It's another great way to build a champion or to build someone who's going to sing your praises to other people. Now, every organization that's important. As a government entity, it's even more important because once again, we have people that maybe have a negative view of government. What we're hoping is that these people, when they're out and about in their neighborhoods, they might have something happening where like, oh, see, Dakota County's choosing to do this. I disagree with them on them pulling up all these trees. Like, see, they're just out to get us. I'm hoping that a volunteer will say, I was at that event. And the reason why they're pulling up those trees is that we're trying to rehabilitate that area back into native prairie habitat. And those trees aren't native in that biome, and hopefully have a conversation of like, oh, never realized that. From the outlook, it looks like they're just pulling trees up. But from, further digging in, oh, I realized why they would want to do that. Okay, that makes sense. So we're building champions. We're educating people to, help educate our constituents, which is a part of our job. So it's twofold. So we also do t-shirts though, for some programming. Usually what I reserve for those higher ticket items, are there programming that you're trying to build a following with? Are these kind of high intensive programs that you really want to have a core competent volunteer following because you really need those people to stick around? If you can kind of give them, ownership by maybe giving them a t-shirt or a logo, things like that, and they can kind of have ownership behind that, we're hoping that that impresses upon them to come back year after year because now it's their program too. Now they have a shirt. Now they feel, oh, like I'm important in that. So we kind of reserve those for certain activities and stuff. And then finally, what we do, because we really want this to not be siloed by department, we want all of our volunteers to feel welcome because we want them to cross-pollinate between departments. I don't want just a library volunteer. I want a volunteer who's like, I'll volunteer in the library, parks, you name it, I'll do it. So we have a big event at every year annually that will draw people, our volunteers. So anyone who gave hours to us in that last year, we invite them, and we have like a big, we do like a dinner buffet. We have entertainment. Every year we try to do a theme and make it a little bit different and stuff. And I'm lucky, and I'm definitely blessed by our leadership that we have a budget for that. So I can kind of put that to that. I know that can be really hard sometimes. But honestly, when you look at it too, that big, shiny ticket item, I would say it doesn't impress people as much as just being there on the day to day and doing your job well and making sure that you have, you're ready to go so that when volunteers are there, their time's not wasted, their talent's not wasted. That speaks huge volumes to them over maybe something flashy and shiny. I've seen organizations that have a lot of budget that throw a lot of stuff at volunteers, and sometimes they have some of the worst ratings when it comes to volunteers because they're like, I show up and they don't care that I'm there. I show up, no one greets me. I show up and I stand around for half the time. Sometimes it's the little things that really make the biggest impact.
Yeah, no, I fully agree with that. First of all, thank you very much for sharing sort of your experience and sort of the journey of the volunteer engagement process for Dakota County. There's a question from Ambria, and I'm calling out Ambria's name because I want to point out that this is not coming from Better Impact. But there's two questions. Number one, now that you're 10 years in, and remembering that 10 years ago you started with a blank sheet, what would you do differently, or what would you focus on or identify as being crucial that you've learned now that you're 10 years in that you didn't know back then? So that's number one. And related to that, and Ambria, thank you for asking this question. Um, what about using Better Impact has made your program or has made your program? What about using Better Impact has made your program and helped it the most? And I know that you've talked about some of the administrative documentation, but if there's anything else, go ahead and share that too.
Yeah, I mean, I say with Better Impact, what's great about it is that once again, it helps with that busy work. It helps kind of keep everything contained. And I'm naturally a pretty organized person. You can ask my wife that. Like, I love bins, I love totes, I love throwing stuff into those and putting a label on it. And then it drives me nuts when my kids don't put stuff back in the bin. It's like it says it literally on the bin what should be in there. What are you doing putting dinosaurs with Pokemon? Like, come on, man. So I'm normally very organized. So if you're not, Better Impact's a great way to help you get more organized. But if you're already organized, it just enhances that. It allows you to keep track of all that stuff. It keeps it in one place. It keeps it nice. It keeps it tidy. I love that. What I love about it too is that it allows us to stay connected to our volunteers. The communication access, the app, all of that really helps us to stay on the forefront of people's minds because we're communicating with them. When they see Better Impact, they know who's coming from that. And so that's just been really just helpful for us to really just build that relationship. Because this is what this whole thing is you're building relationships with people. You're building trust, you're building transparency, and you're gaining all of those. And that's when people show up to say, I trust you, I trust the work that you're doing, I trust the mission, and I'm excited for that. What can I do to help? So, I mean, in the short run, like I said, Better Impact is a game changer. It allows us to really be polished and give that time that we need to make our quality programming what it is. So I think, yeah, that's just a really just helpful one, in that for me, at least to say that's, I mean, there's so many things when it comes to Better Impact. The opportunities that we can do through that. Like I said, sometimes, I mean, I don't even use 100% of Better Impact. There are some things where I'm like, it's not really for us. But there's so much there that's what's helpful too, is that you're able to kind of build out and kind of say, hey, what can I do with this? Is there a way that I can maybe create a shortcut? Oh, there is. Perfect. It gives you some place to at least go and take a look instead of having to kind of figure out on your own. I mean, even the treasure trove of Better Impacts, help pages and the wealth of information that they have. It's over exhausting. Sometimes you look at the list, you're like, holy cow, there's so much here. But it's so great because once again, you know where to go. You know where to, it's a one-stop shop to tap into a lot of different things that you need to do your day-to-day job. 10 years has been a long time. I would say that's a great question. I love that question. I might answer the question, though, in a way that you may not like, in the sense that I don't know if I'd do anything differently because the mistakes I made, I learned. I'm not the person that I am today if I would change anything by the mistakes that I went through because they're really helpful somewhat. And I will say, nothing huge. We had never had anything big where it's like, oh my gosh, like this almost ruined it for us. Luckily, we just never had anything like that happen. I would say maybe the reason why was because we were always prepared. And I'd say once again, we have a risk management department where their whole job is to look to the future and be like, here are all the things that might cause us issues. So let's make sure we have paperwork, liability, priorities, all that put into place, policies, so we're saved from that. And so I got tapped into that. But I had to put myself there. I had to reach out to them. I had to make sure that they were aware who I was. Same with our attorney's office. I had to introduce myself and work with them to build up all of our policies. Like I had to network a lot. And I would say that, in some ways, a lot of people try to do this by themselves without asking for help. And don't do that. Ask for help. Get people to come alongside of you, even if it's just an hour meeting and you can just glean information from that, any way that you can kind of build people that will support you with what you're doing. Because you don't know it all. I know that we think that we know it all. We're as volunteer leaders and managers and engagers, we are a lot of the time, we are very good about being Renaissance men and women, the Swiss Army knife kind of deal where we do a lot of things, right? We wear a lot of hats, but I think sometimes we think that, oh, whatever, I'll just write this policy myself, or I'll just do this myself because I'll do it. It's like, well, yeah, you can write it, but then find someone who that's their wheelhouse. That's their, content that they know what to do. They're the content expert. Ask for their help because they're going to maybe see things that just once again, because we have so many things going on, they're going to really be able to pinpoint and make it even better on that. So I would say definitely do that. The one that I will kind of tell people is when it comes to giveaways, um, be careful when it comes to wearables. I'll just say that because those babies are high ticket items. And believe me, you're never going to please everyone. It's either going to be the wrong size, wrong fit, wrong color, you name it. So if you're thinking about doing a high ticket item like that, just be aware that make sure you do your homework. Don't just willy nilly order 10,000 t-shirts and then realize that, man, only 9,000 people, or only 1,000 people like it. 9,000 aren't going to wear it. Like now you just wasted a lot of money. So I preface that and that's one thing I've learned over I used to be a lot when it came to like, doing wearables because I'm like, oh, great. Our logo's out there, our name's out there. What a great thing. But then realizing that, oh, you know what? It only works when people actually wear it instead
Yeah,
of
yeah.
in a closet somewhere. So that's the one. If I could do differently, I would be a lot more judgmental when I got requests for t-shirts. I would ask deeper questions like, why do we need this? What's it going to be used for? How long are we going to need it for? And if we do that, we need to invest volunteers into the design as well as ordering the shirt because I want to make sure that they actually wear that thing. And it gets worse if you buy jackets or anything else that's even more expensive. That's when it even gets more worse because you're like, oh my gosh, we just spent $60 a piece on this vest. And everyone's like, yeah, no, I don't wear it. And it's like, oh my gosh, why did we spend all that money for no reason?
Right, absolutely. Yeah, those are all great, helpful tips. I see we're coming up to the last few minutes of our time together. And I just want to say to you, Garrett, thank you very much for sharing your advice, your wisdom, your experience. It has been truly a pleasure working with you over the last 10 years. Being one of the first customers that I got to interact with when I came to Better Impact, having once been a user of the software myself. So thank you for that. For everybody that's in the chat, thank you very much for the questions that were posed. That definitely led to, I think, some great conversation and some insights. And for those of you that were having conversations and helping one another in the chat as well, thank you so much. Honestly, one of the benefits of being part of this profession is that we all work together and share and support one another. And I think that this is just, again, another example of sharing ideas and experience to help others that are in need. With that, before you guys go, I am posting into the chat a link for your PDU. So don't forget to grab that. And then lastly, if you found this webinar helpful, we have what are called user groups. Garrett is one of the hosts for our user groups, and they are groups by industry primarily that talk about volunteer engagement and best practices and how to use the software to make the most of your volunteer engagement experience. And if you're unfamiliar with our user groups, I am putting a link in how you can join to those. So feel free to take a look. And for those of you that forget this link, you can always find it under the We're Here to Help button in your software. There's a big link there that says join a user group. We'd love to have you. We're trying to grow our community because, we all realize that for the most part, we're offices of 1 and 2 in large organizations, and we're only going to grow and develop as we work together. So we'd love to have you, and we appreciate all of you coming and attending today's session.